What's up, my friends? I'm Matt. This is the 10-Minute Bible Hour podcast, and I got to do something really fun a couple of weeks ago. I got to run down to Colorado and hang out with my buddy Jeff Foote, who makes the music for this podcast. And so you probably noticed that we have a little rotation of music that we go with at the beginning of the program. Is different for each day of the week. And then we've got this normal little outro music that we do. It's kind of, cute, and it just sort of vanishes away off into space. And I think it's lovely. It's from an album he made about a year ago. Dude is wildly talented, longtime friend of mine. But you've probably also noticed that every now and then he does these little Easter egg bits at the end where there's some reference or acknowledgement in the episode, and he somehow alludes to that, sometimes very overtly, sometimes in much more subtle ways, with pastiche to some well-known music there at the end. So please, if you would, put a pin in that. I have an idea for something I want to do with the music thing here in a minute that I'll tell you about. But for the moment, this trip down to Colorado to hang out with Jeff, it was amazing. I got to sit in his studio space that he's meticulously designed and put together and see how he goes about things. It was a blast. And we've been bouncing back and forth some stuff that he's working on, and I offer the tiniest little meager contributions to with ideas or suggestions. And it's very fun to watch his process. So I went down there. We spent a whole day working on a new song, something that I don't know if it'll ever see the light of day, but it was really fun to chip away at it. And as we're working on it, the obvious thing to do is to, put down some beats and start building over the top. And then ideas would start to percolate. And Jeff would be like, wait a minute. I got an idea from something that, it's right here. And he'd go back to some very old legend of rock or pop, some deep track, and be like, this element, this little thing right here, that could fit. And that would remind me of something. And I'd go back into the Spotify or the hard drive and be like, no, let's pull this out here. And it was really fun drawing on all of this old, great material to inform this new thing that we were trying to make. But also, we do have music that we've been bouncing back and forth. And by bouncing back and forth, I again mean Jeff does all the work and then I offer him a few thoughts because he's a musical genius and I'm some guy who listens to music sometimes. But we've got this new stuff, and remember to put a pin in it, we've got all of that Easter egg music, all of that pastiche stuff that we've put at the end of episodes here occasionally. And so we're drawing on really old stuff. We're drawing on just like 20-minute throw it together, let's make something fun for the episode kind of stuff. And the result is that something new comes out of it that maybe someday you'll get to hear, and it might be pretty cool. Likewise, in Matthew chapter 13, we are wrapping up the Kingdom Parables discourse, and Jesus tells what looks like to me to be the 8th and final parable of the Kingdom Parables discourse. Now, there are some people who say there are only 7. Those people are smart. I'm sure they have their reasons, but all of these kingdom parables, except the first one, start with the kingdom of heaven is like. And in this final parable, the phrase the kingdom of heaven is like occurs. So it looks like it follows the same format. And even though it's a micro parable, again, it looks like it still counts as a parable. And this one is a micro parable that is maybe forgotten because it just doesn't have a catchy name. All the good parables in the Bible have awesome names, like the parable of the prodigal son. I say that and you're like, oh, man, that's got some weight to it. I can even picture the story there, the parable of the sower, the parable or the story of the rich man and Lazarus. That sticks with you. The parable of the shrewd manager. It sounds so good. But this one, it's the parable of the guy who had a basement and there were some things in the basement and some of them were old and some of them were new and he brought them both out. I mean, that's like the whole parable. That took longer than the parable. The parable of the guy who has a basement and there's stuff in there. That's what we're going to go with. It goes like this, verse 51 of Matthew 13. Have you understood all these things, Jesus asked? Yes, they, the disciples, replied. So Jesus said to them, therefore, every teacher of the law who's been instructed about the kingdom of heaven is like the owner of a house who brings out of his storeroom new treasures as well as old. And that's it. So what do we make of that micro parable? Well, I don't think it's that tough. The image here is of someone who is drawing on a cornucopia, a collection of eclectic things from old and new, and this person keeps the old stuff down in the storeroom. They see the tremendous value of the old stuff. They also see that the old stuff is pointing toward something new and that the new stuff has value as well, much like Jeff and I drawing on old musical influences and more recent musical ideas that he's had. That synthesis, or maybe a better term than synthesis or a better description descriptor would be that linear movement from old to new, with new flowing out of the old into something newer yet. That is descriptive of what is happening here. Now, this theme of old and new is not fresh here at the end of Matthew chapter 13. I mean, it's not too long ago, and we're getting that business about old wineskins and new wine. That deals with the friction that was evident in the frustrating teachers of the law who didn't like Jesus very much, the establishment religious types. They're trying to mix these two things, and it's not working. It's causing friction. It's causing tension. We go back even further, though, and Jesus, in what I think is the most central, important verse of the entire Sermon on the Mount in Matthew chapter 5, Matthew 5:17, where Jesus says, "Don't think that I've come to abolish the law or the prophets. I haven't come to abolish them, but to fulfill them." All of that stuff indicates that in the early going, and now here in the middle going, in the times when people didn't like Jesus very much, in the times where people are more interested and excited about Jesus, even when Jesus is talking with people who really, really like him, like the disciples he's chatting with here, in all of these cases, Jesus is acknowledging that the old is true and real and from God, that the new, what is happening through him, is real and from God, and that the one is the completion of flowing forth from the other. He is also making it clear that the person who doesn't get it, who doesn't have eyes to see and ears to hear, is going to fixate only on the old. I suppose there's a danger even to fixating only on the new. It's all the work of God according to Jesus. And further, Jesus is pretty harsh in the preceding couple of chapters on the people who fixate on the old in such a way that they can't see how it points to the new, or rather how the new is the fulfillment, the natural, needed completion of what God set up in what we call the Old Testament. You have a problem that's introduced in the Old Testament. People are broken. People are sinful. People can't get out of their own way. There is a staying of the wrath of a perfect God introduced in the Old Testament in the sacrificial system through the covenants. People make these sacrifices. Pretty ugly, pretty weird practice. But ultimately, the sacrifices are just other imperfect things sacrificed to cover the sin of imperfect humans. It all begs for some perfect final completion that solves all of that problem. So Jesus shows up, and what's gradually taking shape throughout the book of Matthew is that he is the completion of everything. He's the completion of all the teachings of the Old Testament. The Old Testament gives us dun, 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 dun. It just lingers. And Jesus comes along and rounds out those thoughts. Dun, dun. Jesus is the completion of the Old Testament law, the sacrificial system that gives us a good hearty dun, 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 dun. And then it just leaves us hanging, begging for a complete, perfect, final, ultimate sacrifice to right the wrongs, to mend the gap between fallen people and a perfect God. And so Jesus comes along and bump, bump. So we're getting another one of those completion moments here at the end of the Kingdom Parables discourse where Jesus is effectively saying, hey, okay, you guys get this? And the disciples are like, yeah, we get it. And he's like, all right, then I'm commissioning you as a new kind of teacher of the law, one who goes down into this deep reservoir of storehouse that's underneath the house, and what you come out with is all of the valuable old stuff, and you bring it out, and you also bring out all of the valuable new stuff, and it points toward the truest, realist thing, the completion of all things, which is, now I'm pretending to be Jesus talking, which is me, Jesus, the Messiah, pointing toward my kingdom, which is the truest, realist thing of all. I've got a little bit more that I want to round out on this Kingdom Parables discourse next time around, but final thought, I am introducing a contest. We've never done this before. The contest goes thusly. We are quite a ways away from episode 400. The contest will end at episode 400. And in the meantime, I invite all of you to start working on a document that you can send me as we get toward episode 400 that decodes all of the Easter egg music that Jeff has made at the end of these podcasts. Whoever rightly draws the connection between the music that Jeff did pastiches or homages to and stuck at the end of a few episodes here and there and can tell me how they connect with the episode, you are going to get a prize, and the prize is going to be cool. It won't be ice cream sandwiches Michael Scott style. It'll be something good. Though I guess I could send you melted ice cream sandwiches if that's really, really, really what you wanted. I think it's going to be fun. I look forward to finding out how much of that stuff you catch or what you make of it, or if it's as fun for you as it is for me. All right, I'm tapping out there. I'm Matt. This is the 10-Minute Bible Hour podcast. Let's do this again soon.